In this video, I'm going to show you how to do this asymmetrical fondant wrap technique, and it involves a little bit of math. Don't be scared. It's not that difficult. Just bear with me. And this is also for a denim themed cake, so you will see how I mix the fondant to get that denim look. So let's get started. All right, I sound like a broken record, but if I don't say it, people don't think that I use it. So there is Tylose powder mixed into my fondant. I only use marshmallow fondant. Store-bought fondant is a little too soft. I just mix a little bit of this Tylose powder into the fondant, and you will see what I do. So I'm sprinkling some of it on there. It's about 1/4 of a teaspoon. It looks like a lot more, but it's not. And I'm kneading it into the fondant. And I have some of this navy blue fondant here, and I had no idea how I was going to make this denim until I started kneading this fondant together, and I stopped partway through and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect look for a denim look. So I decided to stop there. So I did not knead it the whole way, and I'm rolling it into a little log. I don't want too much white showing, so I'm putting the white facing down, and I need to sprinkle down a little bit of cornstarch, and then I'm rolling it really tall and then really long. Now I did measure my cake before, but I will show you later on in this video how I make sure that I am rolling the fondant out long enough and tall enough, and it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. And now I'm taking a little spatula and sliding it underneath just to make sure this fondant isn't sticking to the countertop. I do have some cornstarch underneath, but sometimes it sticks. I'm lifting it up, sprinkle a little bit more down, and there's enough on that side so I don't need it. And look how beautiful this is. It's not exactly a denim pattern, but it gives the impression of denim. So I want to stack the cake. I got the bottom tier out of the refrigerator. I want to find what looks most symmetrical and mark the front with a little marker. And this is just about as tall as my ruler, so I can't stick the ruler in there, so I'm lining the straw up with the top of that blue little nubbin there, and then marking with a marker at the end of the ruler so I know where to cut the excess pieces off. And then I am putting them in the bottom tier, and I want to make sure that it is level. And it looks like it needs to be lifted up on the front and on the right. So when I'm putting some icing down, I'm putting a little bit more icing in the very front and on the right side. That way the cake will sit level. So I got that other tier out of the refrigerator. The icing is cold and hard, so I'm not going to mess it up when I handle it. And I'm just going to put this on top. Now I want to look around it and just make sure that it is perfectly center. And again, make sure it's level, and I'm going to repeat the process. Now I do have a video where I go into complete detail on how I stack my cakes, and that will be linked in the description, but it's just the same thing for all of the tiers. Marking the straws where I need to cut them off, putting them in the tier, making sure that it's level, getting down some icing, and then putting on that top tier. And I just keep turning it to make sure that the most symmetrical part is facing the front. And then again, I'm going to make sure that it is level and dowel the cake. And again, I go over this in my video on how I stack my cakes. Now, we have to do some math here, so don't get discouraged. On the right side of the cake, I want this middle tier, the middle tier is what I'm starting with, to stick up a little bit over the side. So that I measured how tall that was, and I need it to be 5.5 inches on the right side, and I'm going to do 1.5 or just 1 inch on the left side. And then I need to measure the circumference, so I'm wrapping the tape measure around there and marking that it is 25 inches around. So the piece of fondant that I rolled out has to be 1 inch on the left and the right, 25 inches long, and 5.5 inches tall in the middle. It'll make sense as I do this. I put the cake back in the fridge. So making sure that this is 25 inches long, I have my tape measure, and I'm just measuring that, and that looks perfect. So now I just want to cut a straight edge along the bottom. Now I have to find the middle. Half of 25 is 12.5, so I have that right there. And I'm just taking a little piece of fondant to mark where the middle part is, and that's a weird way for me to do it, but I just decided to do it that way. And then at that middle mark, it has to be 5.5 inches tall. So I'm making sure that it's straight on the bottom, and then I'm taking that 5.5 mark and putting it at that bottom part of the fondant, and then using my pizza cutter right where that piece of fondant is at the top, because that's the center, and just marking how tall it needs to be. Then on the left and the right, it needs to be 1 inch. So I'm putting the 1 inch down. I do this a little better later on. I don't like the way that I did the 1 inch on each side, but that's okay. Now I'm starting at the 1 inch part on the right side and going up to that center mark that I made in the middle. And then I'm slowly going to come down the other side. Now I just do this by eyeballing it, and I'm going to refine it to make it look more symmetrical. There might be a way to get a more precise cut. See right there, I went a little above the 1 inch mark. That's not a big deal because I'm going to refine it. So I'm just removing it from that excess fondant and I'm eyeballing this and I'm just trying to trim it so it looks even and symmetrical, right? So now you can look at it and do you see how it's a little thinner on the right side and a little thicker on the left side? So this is just me being able to eyeball it and see that there's a little bit of a difference. So then I just want to take my pizza cutter and just trim it a little bit more just so it looks a little more even. And good, now we got my cake out of the refrigerator. Remember that icing is cold and hard, so I'm not going to mess it up as I do this. I have some piping gel and I'm working on the middle tier first. So it's going to be higher on the right side and lower on the left. So I'm putting the piping gel up high on the right side and then coming down the cake so it's 1 inch on the left. And then I grab that piece of fondant and I am wrapping it around. So I'm starting on the right side of the cake and then I'm wrapping it around so this is going to meet on the left side of the cake. And I just have to adjust it to make sure that that fondant is touching the top of the bottom tier. Then where it meets on the left side, I'm just cutting it so I can create a seam. I'm going to get a little bit of piping gel behind it and press that down and just using my clean hands. My hands are always clean when I work with my cakes, just to make sure that that is pressed against the side of the cake. So let's work on the bottom tier. I did the measurements off camera. It's 31.5 inches circumference. In the middle is 15.75 inches where it has to be 6.5 inches tall. And again, we're doing 1 inch on either side. So I have to make this first. I already rolled it out when I filmed that part, but I'm adding a little bit of coloring to get this deep blue with some royal blue mixed with some purple and a little bit of black. And the coloring really softens this. So I'm adding some Tylose powder to this and I'm kneading the Tylose powder in here. And I'm going to let that sit for about 20 minutes so that can set. So after that sets, then I have some light blue fondant and some dark blue. And I'm doing the same thing where I'm kneading it together. I kind of wish I used a little bit lighter blue because that medium blue got lost in this dark blue. So if you're going to do this kind of design, I would do a lighter blue with the dark blue. But anyway, I found a good part that I liked after I rolled it out, get down some cornstarch. And then I'm going to roll it tall and really long. So like I said, it needs to fit the measurements that I measured before. So I'm just carefully rolling this out. And again, this fondant is about 1/4 inch thick. And I'm making sure that it is long enough, and it is. So I just want to let this sit here for about 20 minutes to set up. And look how pretty that looks. So after 20 minutes, once it's set up, I take my spatula and just remove it. Make sure that it's not sticking to the countertop because I've done it before where you try to lift up fondant and it's sticking and it's a big pain in the butt. So you just want to release it first. And again, 31.5 inches long. The middle is 15.75 where it has to be 6.5 inches tall. I hope this isn't confusing. I'm cutting straight edges on the side and on the bottom. And then I'm going to find the center. 15.75 is the center, so I'm going to mark it with a little piece of fondant. And then I'm going to hold the 6.5 inches of the ruler down at that flat edge and just make a little mark with my pizza cutter. And then I'm making the little mark at 1 inch on either side. That's a better way to do it than I did in the beginning. Make sure the bottom is straight. And then I'm starting down at the 1 inch and I'm coming up to that little mark that I made in the middle, and then coming down the other side, ending at the other inch. And it still was a little off, so I do have to refine this. So again, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm taking my pizza cutter and I'm trimming this until it looks symmetrical on both sides. And that looks really good. So I got my cake out of the refrigerator again, and I do want to get the piping gel down. So this time it needs to be low on the right side and high on the left side. So I'm just putting piping gel down so that fondant will stick to it. And then I rolled up the fondant on either side. I will show you how I do that for the top tier, but I'm starting on the left side and I'm wrapping it around to the right side this time because I'm having each tier be the opposite way. So again, I want to make sure that that is touching the cake board and make sure that fondant is completely pressed against the cake so there's no air bubbles that are forming behind it. And then where it meets on the right side, I'm just cutting through both pieces, remove the excess piece, get some piping gel down, and press that seam together. And then I just want to take my fondant smoother and smooth this out, making sure that it's pressed against the cake. And that looks pretty. I'm going to put that back in the fridge. Now let's do the top tier. So I'm a little out of frame, but that left side is 6 inches tall. The circumference is 19, which is 9.5 in the middle. So I'm going to roll this out. So now I have white fondant here, and I'm taking a tiny piece of dark blue fondant and I start kneading it in there. And I don't knead it in completely, just a little bit, and I think that looks good. So now this white fondant is really soft, so I had to add a little more Tylose powder to it. So I'm kneading that Tylose powder into this fondant, and again, I'm going to let it sit here for about 20 minutes so it can set. After 20 minutes, I'm going to start kneading all of this together. So I'm kneading the white fondant first, and then I am doing the same technique that I did before. So I'm kneading it together, but not completely. And then I thought that it looked too white. It wasn't dark enough. So there I go, adding a little bit more blue. And then I was like, oh crap, that's too much blue. So I want to make sure that you couldn't see that dark blue. So I rolled it in until the lighter blue was showing, right? So I'm going to roll it into a little log here and put that darker blue facing down, and then just flatten it out, get down some cornstarch, and you know the process. I'm going to roll this out, making sure it's long enough and tall enough. And I'm going to let this sit for about 20 minutes to set. And then I'm going to cut it. So at 19 inches long, it has to be 6 inches tall in the middle. So I'm cutting the straight edges on the sides and the bottom. And then half of 19 is 9.5, right? So I just marked that with a piece of fondant. And then I took the 6 inches at the bottom and I marked it with my pizza cutter, just like I've been doing, starting down on one side, going up in the middle, going over that little mark, and then coming down the other side to the 1 inch mark. And I just want to, oh, I forgot to lift that up with the spatula, see? And then I just refine it again, making sure that it is perfectly symmetrical. Now I got my cake out of the refrigerator one more time, and we're going to do the same process. So it needs to be low on the right side and then high on the left and low as it comes back around. And then here is how I rolled it up. So I lightly roll up one side, lightly roll up the other because I don't want to wrinkle it. And then I'm starting on the left side and then wrapping this around, and then it's going to meet on the right side. It's a little tricky when you get to this tier. The fondant was a little softer and I don't want to mess up the rest of the cake. But you see how I'm using my hands just to move it into the right place, making sure that it is meeting the top of that middle tier. And then I'm going to wrap it completely around where it meets in the middle. I'm just cutting through both pieces and then removing the extra piece, get some piping gel behind it and press it down. And now I just want to refine it, making sure that this is completely stuck to the cake. So I have to get a little bit of piping gel behind the pieces that weren't sticking. And then I'm taking a little piece of fondant and I'm smoothing it with the fondant. I didn't want to use a fondant smoother because it was like too square. This contours to the shape of the cake, so I just find it a little easier to do it this way. And I'm just trying to get all of the wrinkles out and make sure that it is perfectly flat against the cake. And I'm just taking a dry paintbrush and removing the excess cornstarch. But this is such a cool technique. You can do this. You don't have to do these colors. I've done it in other colors and I will show you at the end. But look how beautiful this is. It's such an easy technique and it looks so pretty. I'm going to put that back in the fridge until I finish decorating it. So there you go. With a little bit of math and precision, you can do this asymmetrical fondant wrap technique. Now with a few things. Number one, I only work with American buttercream so that icing, when I put it in the refrigerator, it solidifies and it's really hard. So when I'm wrapping this fondant around it, it's not going to mess it up. If you work with a whipped icing, this technique probably won't work. The second thing is to make sure that you have Tylose powder mixed into your fondant. And I know I say this all the time, but I don't know, people don't listen to me or something. But I only use marshmallow fondant. I find that store-bought fondant, while it's good for some things, I just personally find it to be way too soft. Even if you add the Tylose to the fondant, it still doesn't set up as hard as the marshmallow fondant. Not that it's hard, but it just doesn't rip or tear or stretch when that Tylose is added. I do have videos showing you how to make the marshmallow fondant, and that will be linked below. But for each wrap, I rolled it out, I cut it, and then I let it sit for a little while, probably about 10 to 15 to 20 minutes or so it wouldn't stretch, so it would hold its shape when I wrapped it around the cake. So if your fondant is too soft and you lift it up to wrap it around, it's going to distort and it's not going to work. So I've done this technique before and it was on this cake, and when I posted it, people were asking me how I did that wrap technique, so I was excited to be able to finally film it for you. But that one, I did the same technique, except I rolled out really thin fondant using my clay gun and put that on the very top. So here's the final design, and how adorable is this? This was inspired by a picture that was given to me. I don't know who the original designer is, so I can't give them credit, but she wanted something similar, and this is what I came up with, and we added the crown on top. I do have a video showing you how I make a crown cake topper, and that will be linked below. And I'm going to post a video in my Cake Academy, so it's just exclusively for my members, showing you how I did the pockets and the silver stitching. So I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them below. And just a reminder, I have ebooks with all of my favorite recipes. I have my signature scratch pound cake recipes, my best Dr. Cake Mix recipes, all of my buttercream icing and filling recipes, along with my favorite numbers and my favorite fonts. So they will all be linked below. And I do have a Cake Academy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. All of that information is in the description. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. The link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you can check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next, and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.